was in a Lyft yesterday chatting with the driver when he said, I hope this year is better than last year. And I said, I don't know why it would be. The only thing that's changed is the date. Nothing will change if people don't change things. Because let's be real with these New Year celebrations. They're fun and all, but the only thing that changes in the new year is that people who normally don't party don't feel guilty about the hangover from the night before. Everything else, completely the same. And that should not surprise reasonable, logical thinking people. I mean, you should not be surprised that the Proud Boys are planning another invasion of D.C. on January 6th, the day the reading of the Electoral College votes will formally declare Joseph R. Biden as the next president of the United States. And you should expect them to be violent, and you should expect the Metropolitan Police Department here in D.C. to enable their violence, because that's what they all did last year, just a few weeks ago, actually. So what about the change of the date on a calendar will change that? Nothing. You should not be surprised that Trump called Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and alternately threatened and begged him to find some votes to overturn the election. We've all heard that leaked recording at this point where Trump said, quote, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we need because we won the state to overturn the election in Georgia. You shouldn't be surprised that Trump somehow expects Raffensperger to find a bunch of votes that 3 recounts or audits haven't already found. You shouldn't be surprised that Trump focuses in particular on accusing election workers in mostly Black Fulton County, Georgia, of scanning ballots 3 times or hiding ballots under tables or forging signatures. It might be a little bit surprising that Raffensperger actually challenged Trump's crazy pants claims pretty forcefully at times in that leaked audio, but nobody should be surprised that Trump thought it was a good idea to call Secretary of State Raffensperger and threaten him to find a bunch of votes to overturn an election based on a slew of not only unsubstantiated, but at times Looney Tunes claims, because what about this man's presidency hasn't already been all of that? It's definitely weird that some of the newly elected Republican lawmakers have announced that they plan to challenge the election results. I mean, it's weird because they just won their seats in Congress as a result of the same election that they're challenging. I mean, people like Andrew Clyde, the refreshman Republican from Georgia, who's planning to challenge the election results in the state that he believes Trump actually won because the election was rigged against him. But I guess it wasn't rigged against Clyde because he won his. Do you see why this makes no sense? I guess it makes sense on some level, and it's absolutely weird and nonsensical, but it shouldn't surprise you and me, because hasn't the GOP proven to lack moral standing, principles, decency, any bit of dignity, and in the past 4 years, any kind of logic in falling in line behind Trump all this time? Nobody should be surprised that the Progressive Caucus ended up voting for Nancy Pelosi to keep her job as Speaker of the House, even though several members of the caucus made a huge deal about Pelosi and Schumer being the stumbling blocks to moving toward the progressive legislative priorities that the people sent those progressive politicians to Congress to push. And the only way their vote for Pelosi to continue her tenure at the helm of the House of Representatives was a surprise to anyone was if you weren't paying attention to how much lip service some of them paid to challenging the Democratic establishment on Twitter and Instagram, but actually fell in line behind Mama Bear Pelosi in nearly every House vote before now, including voting to overturn Trump's veto of that massive NDAA rather than to break ranks and demand a vote on the $2,000 stimulus checks, at least first. Are you really surprised that the rollout of these vaccines is a complete disaster? I mean, because of the lack of any logistical plan to distribute the vaccines that require very precise, storage, and administrative protocols, only a fraction of the promised 100 million doses have been delivered to people. Around 3 million so far out of that 100 million planned to be administered by March. That was the promise, making reaching that projection now all but impossible. But are we really surprised that the government that created the conditions that facilitated the needless deaths of over 350,000 people from a virus that those people could and should have been provided protection by this government from didn't bother to establish a logistics plan to distribute the much touted vaccines? Is that a surprise? And it doesn't appear that this government is going to do much of anything to remedy the disastrous situation it created on either account. The current administration's obsession with escalating attacks on Iran, enabling the genocidal policies of the apartheid regime of Israel, heating up the Cold War against China, using Russia and anti-communism as the scapegoat for its horrible anti-human and undemocratic policies domestically, and its rapacious, bloodthirsty imperialism abroad, it shouldn't have surprised anyone that the current administration that represents one political party held these political positions, and it shouldn't surprise anyone that in just a few days, the new administration that represents the other political party will not deviate from the very same positions. The one good thing that has happened this year that didn't require us to actually do anything was the judge in the United Kingdom ruling not to extradite Julian Assange back to the U.S., but make no mistake, press freedom and the First Amendment rights of independent journalists and whistleblowers will continue to be under attack by the Biden administration, because you know that if Assange had been extradited, Biden would have prosecuted him just as sure as Trump would have. So no one should be surprised that nothing will change in the new year simply by virtue of the change of the date on the calendar, or simply by virtue of the changing of the guard of the U.S. empire, because the one thing that has not changed and does not with every day that passes is U.S. imperialism. And people who didn't do anything to affect any change last year really shouldn't be surprised that nothing changes, because nothing will change if you are waiting for someone else, especially a politician in this system, to change it. If we want change, we are the ones who will have to make that happen. And you have to commit to doing more than just voting, folks. Expressing an empty hope that things will magically be better this year because the date changed is absolutely not where it's at. So if you do New Year's resolutions, this needs to be it, that you need to be the change that you hope comes with this year. And I don't mean to sound like Barack Obama here. I really mean this. Make that hope a reality. Join an organization. Immerse yourself in political education. Learn about the issues of your neighbors and friends in your community. Organize to meet those needs to the extent that you can. Expand your efforts person by person. Do more than just hope that this year is better than the last. Actually do the work, because there's a lot of it to be done. Follow Luqman Nation on patreon.com/Luqman Nation for lots of great content.